Now this is a long video, but it does go into step-by-step detail on how I make a papercraft. So I'll be showing you how to make this little pie in a box papercraft. And as always, if you have any questions or recommendations, I'll try and answer them, so let me know in the comments. And you can always join our Discord to get a more guided help with your papercrafting. Opening up Blender, we're gonna go straight into, you're gonna select General as a customary thing to do. You're gonna select everything by hitting A and delete it, as we always start from scratch here. Alright, now the first thing you're gonna do for the pie 3D model is the pie itself by hitting Shift A, which will add a mesh. The options you have when adding a mesh will use a cylinder. If you hit Tab, it takes you into edit mode. If you hit it again, you're back in object mode. You can switch between them manually up here. So in edit mode, give the sides a bit of a taper kind of look. In order to do that, we're gonna go from vertex select mode, which just selects only the points where the lines meet up. But if we go into face mode, which is face select, you can select the entire face. I'll be selecting this bottom face as we're gonna shrink it upwards. And the way you can do that is by hitting G, which moves it around. And since I want to move it just straight up, I can lock it to the Z axis, which would be this. And I can do that by hitting Z. So now I'm locked against the Z axis. To look at it directly from the X axis side. And it's still being selected, but I can go back, select it, and then look at it from the side, and hit G again, move it around, and Z to lock it against the Z axis. So a pie tin about this tall seems good to me. So having it there. And now we're gonna shrink this bottom circle just to give it that tapered look. And you can do that by hitting S, which scales things, which is what we're gonna do. So again, you can look at it from the side while you do that. So having it selected, hit S, and you can scale it inwards a bit. And boom, that looks pretty good. And I already have it selected, so I'll just, again, use G, Z to move it around. Yeah, that looks like a pretty good pie tin. So now we get to make the pie itself, the pie that goes right on top. And before we do that, we can go over here, and where it says cylinder, we can double click and rename it, which I'll be renaming it to tin. And now, having it renamed, what we can do is go back to object mode by hitting Tab with our tin selected. You could do it here, but I'm just going to do it up here. We can copy our object and then paste it. And now we have two tins. And you can see that you have two tins even though they're directly over each other by hiding one using this hide viewport eye, which hides the original and leaves the current one still here, or we can see just the original. And I'll be hiding the original tin for now, and we'll rename our second tin as pie. So having our pie selected, we could go back into edit mode by hitting Tab. And again, what we're gonna do is rotate it 180 and just place it on top of our tin. So we could re-enable our tin so we can see it again. The pie's object edit mode, we'll just only select that when we hit A. So hitting A, you can hit R, which is to rotate, and you can rotate it. We want it to be rotated perfectly around instead of just how we view it. After hitting R, so you'll hit R for rotate, and then you hit the axis that you want. So in this case, we'll just hit X to rotate it around the X axis. Because we want the perfect 180 degree rotation, after hitting rotate and the axis that you want, you can then type in the degree that you want. So I want 180 degree rotation. So I type in 180 and that perfectly rotates it. And now you can left click to the side to confirm. And that's our pie piece rotated around. You want the pie's bottom face to go right on top of the pie's top face. We're going to use this tool called Snap, which will snap surfaces or whatever your selection is together, which is what you'll select here. So we want the face to snap to the face. So we'll select face project. We can hit A to select the pie, and what we're going to do is move it up by hitting G and then Z to move it directly up. And as we lift it up, we want to have the pie's bottom face snap to the tin's top face. But the way the snap tool works is it will snap the two closest selections. So in this case, it'll snap the top of the pie to the top of the tin. We want the bottom of the pie to snap to the top of the tin, so I'll just move it up above it, confirming it. And now since these two are the closest, they'll snap together when I bring them together. So hitting G, Z again, you can put it right over like this, and with the cursor right over the face I want, you can left click, and now they're together like this. With the pie top placed where we want it, now we can scale it and adjust it to how we want it. So you can deselect the snap tool since we won't be using it anymore, and select this pie's top here. So using our S tool, we can shrink it down a bit, and again using our G tool with Z, we can bring it down just a bit. Normally the pie tin will have an edge lip all the way around, so to get that look, we could just shrink our pie, or we can make our tin bigger. I'll just shrink our pie for this example. And now to select the bottom face, you can just select it like this as it goes through the object that is in edit mode, and now you can scale it. But let's say you have multiple faces and you can't really see them all that well. You could just hide your tin to see the bottom face of your pie and select it that way, and then view it again. So we're gonna hit S to scale it, and we'll bring it in just a bit so the pie doesn't go all the way to the edge and the tin has a bit of a lip. And that's basically our pie complete. You could just mess around with it a bit more to get the right look that you may want to go for, but this is our very basic pie complete. And since you did make a 3D model, you can 3D print it, which has nothing to do with the video, but I just wanted to show off my 3D printer. Now we could go onto the box. So hit tab to go into object mode, shift A, mesh, and you'll hit cube. The original cube, but this time it's actually useful. Having our cube selected, you can go into edit mode. All the cube is just our pie's container in which will contain our pie. It's just wide enough to have the pie in it, but it'll be a tight squeeze once you actually make it and try and put it in. So hitting our A, we can make it slightly bigger by hitting S. And although that seems bigger, I kind of don't have much of an idea of how the pie looks like while inside of the box. So I could just delete a face by selecting it and deleting the face, and now I can see inside of it. But let's say you want to keep the face on, or just keep anything untouched while you're working on it, but still want to see inside of it. You can go up here and go into viewport shading, which is this wireframe mode. That way you only see the outline of the edges and can see through the meshes. And now looking at it from the side, the pie seems to have plenty of room. All we're doing is just making the box the right size for the pie. So hitting A, G, and Z, you can move the box over the pie, and using our tools we used before, you can select the face and move it down by hitting G and Z, just so our pie fits in a perfectly sized box. You could have the face go right up against the pie, but we're not picky on the tolerance, so we're fine like that. And now that's basically it. You could go back into solid viewport, in the solid shading. You could go back to the solid shading, and there you go. There's your pie in a box. You could rename the cube to box, and you could hide it to see what's inside. Now I do texture my models in Blender, but I still do or manually edit it in Krita afterwards. So I'll still show you how I texture them. Now there's definitely an easier way to do it, but this is the way I've been doing it lately. Your complete 3D model of your pie, you'll go into selecting which whatever part you want. So I'll start off with the pie. You'll go into material properties and add a new material. And here in the base color, you'll go to the yellow circle and add an image texture. And now, normally I would have had an image texture made elsewhere to serve as my kind of my color palette for the colors I'll be using. In this case, there isn't a reference we're going off of, so I'll just create a new image texture. I'll name it pie. And this is our resolution, 2048, giving you a great resolution without taking up much space. And for the base color, I'll just leave it at gray. And then you hit OK. And now your pie has an image texture, which is this material 01. And you'll also rename that to pie. So in the tin, for the tin mesh, you can just select this texture to browse the materials, and you'll hit pie. Since we won't be texturing the box, you could leave it as is. And now with your pie and tin both having a material and texture set to them, you can now go into UV editing mode, which is basically going to map out each surface so that you can then paint on them. So going into object mode, you can select both of them by hitting A, and you can go back into edit mode, and now they're both selected. So if you hit A, they're automatically mapped out, but we want them to be mapped out in a nicer way, so as we're painting them, the paint won't lay in a weird manner. Having it selected, you can hit U and Smart UV Project. And now the angle limit is set to 66 by default, and the island margin I find 0.02 to be a good spacing in between the parts. Hit OK, and with them projected, now you can go into texture paint. So here you can go to paint mode, from view into paint mode, and now you can start painting. So being in object mode, you can select what you want to texture first. So we'll just texture our pie first. So having it selected, you can then go into edit mode, hit A to select it, and then now you can go into texture paint, and you're able to paint on it. And you can only paint on one mesh at a time. Oh, and something I find useful is in the material properties, tab, you can adjust the specular value by raising it and dropping the rough, and also raising the roughness, which I find makes the texture look nicer when I'm painting. Since it's going to be a very simple pie, I'm not going to add much texture to it, so I'll just, selecting a tan color for the pie, I'll just use the fill tool to fill it in, and then sometimes you have to click it again just to completely fill in the mesh. And the color does change for each tool, so let's say, so the paint bucket is the tan color, which I can always choose a different color with the eyedropper tool, or change it back. The draw tool is its own color, so let's say I want to have a blueberry looking pie, I could select that, and I can draw straight onto the UV image, or I could draw onto the model over here. In both of these tabs, you can adjust the strength of your brush to be stronger or weaker, or the radius, making a smaller brush. Just feel free to texture your pie however you want. I'll texture it some more in Krita. Now let's say you want to color your tin a different color. You can go into object mode, and instead now select your tin, go back into edit mode, select your part, and then now in texture paint, you can color it whatever you want. Now that we have this basic texture for our pie and tin done, you're gonna want to UV map the box onto the texture. Otherwise, once you open it up in Pepakura, it'll come out kind of wonky. So here you're gonna want to give it a material and just select the pie material like this. And now from here you can go into edit mode, you could adjust the UV mapping over here by going into UV editor. So selecting it all, I'll just scale it down and move it up here in the corner. As I don't want it to have a texture, I just want it to be white, which is why the background for this should have been white, but you can always just color it in yourself. So we'll go into image editor and we'll paint it white. And we'll paint this area white. So now going into edit mode, you can see where all the faces are mapped out, and our box is white, which we can hide and see. And that's basically it. Again, you can continue texturing or adjusting how your pie looks, but we're ready to export it from here. Okay, the two things you're gonna export from Blender now that we're done with our basic pie are the object and the image texture. So before you export the object, you have to make sure they're all visible, otherwise they won't all export. So with all your parts visible, you'll go over here to File, Export. We'll be exporting as an OBJ. And now here, I'm just saving it in my folder Pie Tutorial, and I'll save it as my pie model. Export. And now the image texture. And you can do that by going to Image, Save As, and I'm calling it Pie Texture, and Save Image. And that's all in Blender. Now we can move on to Pepakura. And be sure to save your Blender file in case you need to go back and change some things. Opening up Pepakura, we'll go to File, Open, and you'll open your pie model object. Open, you'll put no flip, and you'll finish it since it's the same from all directions. For the width, I think 2 inches will be big enough for the size of our box and our pie. So, okay. And it may seem like it doesn't have a texture, but hitting unfold, it'll fold out all the pieces like that. And the texture did carry over with our file. But in case it doesn't carry over, or you want to update just the texture, you can go up here to Settings, Texture, and then set your image texture. And you could choose what texture you would want. But in this case, it did carry over. So ideally you want all your pieces to fit in as few pages as possible. So like I'm able to fit all these into one page, and I could print it out like this, but then that leaves you with more work, not as easy of a time assembling your pieces from a template. The first thing we're going to do is separate all the pieces just so they're not already connected. So go up here to join/disjoin faces. Okay, the first tool here is to select and move pieces. So you can select them over here, like that, and just left click on them and hold left to drag them around like this. Same thing with every other piece. And over here is just to rotate pieces. So it gives you the 2 vertex points in which you can select and rotate them around like this. Yeah. But what we're going to be using right now is the join/disjoin faces tool. And we're going to separate our tin to be 3 individual pieces. The bottom face, the top face, and the middle piece. Same thing with our pie. And here I selected the wrong edge to disjoin. So you can just, holding your cursor over an edge will show you which edges you'll be joining or disjoining. So I want to join these 2 edges back. I'll just click once and then the second time. And now they're back to being in one piece. And I'll separate this. We could rearrange it around a bit, but let me do the box first. Now for the box, I do want the top lid to be able to open up and be able to open and close like a normal box, as I don't want it all sealed, as I don't want it to be all sealed shut. So this is the face I want to open up I'll be able to disjoin the the edges by hovering over and clicking on the actual 3D model over here. So here I want this edge to come apart, this edge to not be connected together. So I'll just select it, and now you can see it separated them. Same with here, and this one's already separated. And this one I do want connected, as that'll be the edge where it's still connected. And you do have to play around with it, as you may be joining some edges together, which will automatically separate others. So you do have to play around with it until you get it to be how you want it. And I think that's how I want it. So now with our piece complete, this will be kind of the main body of the box, and this one square will be what opening flap on top. To have it look more aesthetically pleasing and symmetrical, we'll just move this flap over here, and you can do that by going to this edit flaps tool, and it's automatically set to switch flap positions. So now when I go along one of these lines and selecting it, it will switch the flaps between the two, like that. And this is how I want my box to look. Okay, and because the box will only have these sides connecting, as this top piece doesn't need to be glued down with flaps, we can remove these flaps, these 3 flaps. They're just not going to be necessary. So what I'll do is remove these 2 by going to off, no flap. And now clicking it, the flap is erased. Now you can always bring back the flap by going to on, or usually you'll just use on off to place it on whatever side you choose, like that. But in this case, we just want these side flaps off. But I will want to keep this one flap over here, as the flap will serve kind of a bit of a tab that holds it in place. So I'll just switch it over to this side by going to switch flap position, like that. And now we have it over here. And this is how I want the box to be. Now Pepakura automatically gives you a border around the paper. This serves as a way to tell you where a printer normally can't print. As long as you keep your part within this border line, you won't have a problem where the printer can't print on the edge of the paper. So with our box done, now we'll do the tin of the pie. Okay, now I would say this is enough. Like, this is good enough where if you were to print this out, it wouldn't be too hard to make. But this is a lot of tabs, and I don't know about you, but I don't want to cut out this many tabs, as you kind of get diminishing returns with how many tabs versus cutting and folding them all out. So what we're going to do is remove all these tabs, as well as these lines that go with the tabs, and manually make our own tabs in Krita afterwards. Go here to edit flaps, and we're just going to turn them off, so no flaps, and they're off. And with these tools, what you can do is you can hold on the screen, so like left click and hold and drag. You can box select like all the tabs you want to remove. So you can do these pretty easily like that. And you can go like this. And now notice that we want to keep this tab over here, but if we're to remove it, we can bring it back by going to on off and bringing it back like that. So don't be worried about removing them all at once and then bringing them back afterwards. And we'll do the same thing to this pie down here. And bring it back. And now we're still left with all of the fold lines that correspond with the tabs that we removed. And you can remove them by going to set edge color, and it gives you a filter to choose exactly what type of lines you want to deal with. So all we're doing is hiding them. So we can go to hide with using this eraser tool, and we can select which lines we want to get rid of. Now, you could just manually click on each one, or like before, you can box select them like this, but I don't want to remove every single line like that. So hitting Control Z, I'll just remove these lines, and these lines specifically are called mountain folds. So I don't want to remove cut lines, so I can deselect that, and I only want to remove that mountain folds, and there aren't any valley folds here, but you could just deselect that if you didn't want to remove them. So again, select them all like that, and again like that. Let's say I wanted to keep this one here, I can go to hidden line, and you would have to color it again with whatever color you wanted for that line. Color select this line or whatever line you wanted beforehand before you erased it. And now you could just go to the paint brush and color your hidden line. As you see here, lets you select the lines that you had already erased. But again, just remove them all. There. Now it's much cleaner now, but we can just finish up by organizing them so they're not in the way of each other and they're much easier to cut out afterwards. So although you could add the tabs onto this piece, it will look better adding them onto these circle pieces. Yeah. So that's how we're gonna lay them out for it. Okay. Having this circle, this top of the tin piece here, I'll kind of put it out here just so it has even spacing around it, and that way when I add the tabs, they don't interfere with anything else. They won't get in the way. Same thing with this circle, same thing with the bottom of the pie piece down here. Oh yeah, and as you move your pieces around with the move tool, it'll have this little bit of a handle that you can hover over and rotate your pieces. This is nicely laid out. Now you could always rearrange them to be more compact, and if you had more pieces or you want to make the whole model a lot bigger, then you could rearrange them to be a lot closer to each other. But for now, this works, where we're able to fit all of our pieces onto a single page. And that's basically it. Now I'll show you a little thing that it's not that noticeable, but I think it's one of those small details that really makes your template look nicer, which is coloring the lines of your pieces. Now for this white box, it has these kind of dark gray lines. I don't really need to adjust them, but it does make your template look better. So going over here to the set edge color tool, the line tool, you can choose what lines you want to color. So I'll be coloring the cut lines as well as the fold lines. And the only thing I don't want to color are the hidden lines, as this is how we'll be keeping our template. So here you could go into, selecting our paintbrush, you can go into what colors you want to choose. So I'll choose this empty spot, and I'll choose a bit of a light gray color like this. Now, you do want to be careful with what colors you choose, as they might not be as visible once printed out. Because like right now I can see these colors fairly well, but once they're printed out onto paper, they might seem too faint, whether that's because your printer doesn't print as high quality, or typically your colors just won't be as vibrant compared to how they look like on the screen. So choosing this kind of lighter gray, I'll have that chosen, and I'll go over this entire box part. Now see, that's very faint, so once I do cut it out and fold them, the lines won't be all that noticeable. But this is too faint for my liking, so I'll just go back, Control Z, and choose a slightly darker gray. So you can see that's pretty good. I'll go a little bit darker, just so I don't have a problem seeing it. Alright, I think that's, yeah, I think that's pretty good. You could always make it darker or lighter so you can see it better. But I think this is good enough. And now I could do the same thing for this, the gray tin, but I find that this black outline color is already close enough, so it's not too different. As for the pie pieces, you can really tell how the dark outline stands out. And maybe you do want your outline to stand out, as it makes it a lot easier to see a distinct line and the fold line and cut them out there. But for the sake of showing you the same technique, I'll choose, and you could use the dropper tool to get the same color, but now when I paint it, you can see it's very faint. Now I can't even tell where the fold line is, even though you know where the fold line of the tab is. Without having to see the color, it is just nicer to see it like that. So for this orangey, now for this peachy color, I'll just use a darker orange. I'll just use a darker orange so it can have the same color while still standing out. And you can just adjust these settings. So let's say I want that color. I can just go with a darker orange. And now going over it again, you can see it's still visible, but I think a darker color would look nicer. Like that. That seems like a good enough color. So I'll just go over the pieces. And there we go. You can still notice a darker outline without it being so different than from the color. Again, kind of unnecessary, but it does just make your templates look nicer. And yeah, that's our template. We're done. We're basically done here in Pepakura. And now something you can do, okay, you could always come back to Pepakura and see how your template looks like if you need help figuring out where a part goes or how it's folded and whatnot. Something that really helps with that is if you go to a 3D model over here and all the way down here in folding, unfolding animation, which is Control Shift A. But here's the button. But here's where you can select it. And it lays out all your pieces just the way, the same way you have them laid out. And you can zoom outwards. The same way you have them laid out on your page. And if you put play, it'll do a folding animation of how all your parts go together. Like this. Obviously, normally I don't have a box where my object goes into, so I'll be able to see it better. But this is how, this is the folding animation it shows you and how it goes together. You can close out of there. Another thing is, if you want to see the parts that are kind of hidden or blocked by something else, you can just select them like this by left clicking on them, and then it shows you that part while kind of hiding everything else. And you could see multiple at the same time. If you click that and you hold shift, you can click multiple parts and see them all at the same time while hiding everything that's not selected. Yeah, that's it for Pepakura. Well, of course, now we have to export it. So we'll go up here to File. And what I do is, okay, there's there's probably a better way, or at least maybe the way that it's intended to export them as. But what I do is I hit this button, which is print to PDF, and I'll save this page as a PDF file, and I'll have it named as PyModel, and I'll save that. But again, you could go to your settings and go to page and adjust what size paper you use. I use letter, which is 8.5 inches by 11 inches. Okay, well, I'm using the paid version of Pepakura, as it's a software I use a lot, so I don't mind supporting, which I believe gives you the option to save your Pepakura file. And so if you don't pay for the license to use it, you'll only be able to export your page. So if you're to exit out of Pepakura, it wouldn't save your unfolding and template and current template like this. So now opening up Krita, we can go to new file, and I'll just create, and it already gives you predefined settings. I'll just go to US letter, which is the page size I use, with a resolution of 300. I'll open up a new page of that. You'll import your PDF so you can edit it. So I'll import my PyModel PDF, and with the right resolutions as the page I opened up. There's my template. You could have removed this in Pepakura before opening it here. Since we have the liberty to do whatever we want here, I'll just go over this with white. So in a new paint layer, you can select the color you want. I'll select this orange color, and you can be more picky about how you make your tab, but it really doesn't matter. There's not much to it. There's just a few things you might want to keep in mind. This is the bottom of the pie, and this tab will stick out, fold upwards, and be glued to this piece. So as long as this tab isn't bigger than or longer than the piece you're sticking it to, you won't have a problem with it poking out of here. So yeah, it's smaller than that and a good size. So we'll take this tab and move it to where we need it. Now you could adjust your layers. So if I was to drag this tab over it, it would stay behind it. But this template is simple enough where I really don't have to worry too much about that. I wouldn't mind just dragging it up against it, as I wouldn't save too much more time by making the template that way. So yeah, now we could just take this tab and duplicate it and move it around to the other side. Like that. Do the same thing and bring them to either side. And now, okay, this is enough tabs, having 4 tabs like this. The more tabs you add to your piece, the more of a controlled shape you're gonna give to whatever connects to it. So if it was, so in this case, you're gonna curve this piece around this circle. So if you have more tabs sticking out, the more points of contact the curve will have, making it look more curvy. And now with just these 4, it'll kind of have some spots where it has no support and it looks kind of flat. So having these 2 tabs here, I'll just rotate them around so you can have them evenly spaced out. So I'll take these 2 and merge them together so I can rotate them around like this and have another set of tabs evenly spaced out. Again, it's not perfect spacing, but I think it's good enough. And now we can do the same thing to this circle. Having quite a few tabs over here, it does start to get messy, so you can just group them together and give them a name so they don't get mixed up. And you might notice I made this tab slightly smaller, or at least with a slightly smaller base, as otherwise when you fold this tab, it may take too much of your piece. making it just won't look as good. Or, okay, when you're adding tabs to curved edges like this, if you're adding a tab to a piece like this, if it's too wide and you try putting it onto something like this, if I was to fold this across here, it would take quite a chunk out of my part, which is why the smaller your tab is, the less of a chunk you're actually folding out of your part. So as you can see, these aren't taking out too much. And now you can do the same thing to these gray ones. There's our gray tin done. Now, normally I would have added another set of tabs here, but at least for this example, it's not all that important. That's basically your template, ready to be printed out. So now you can save your template as a PDF and print it out. And be sure you saved your actual templates file in case you want to go back and change it. I'll be saving it as PyTemplate1 just so I can keep track if I make any updates to it. I like to print it out using the Windows print settings. Normally your printer is set to the standard quality. I have mine set to be high quality by default. This is how I normally cut out my template, as having each piece individually separated makes them far easier to cut out. Hopefully this tutorial gave you a pretty good idea on how I make my templates, so feel free to follow along if you want a bit of a starting point on how to make your own Papercraft templates. This was a long video, so thanks for watching, and let me know what I should make next.